President Trump has spent this milestone anniversary doing what he does best, making the story of America a story about himself. After years of suggesting that his face belongs on Mount Rushmore, the president traveled to the monument last night. He did not repeat that idea from the podium, but passengers aboard Air Force One were handed cookies depicting Mount Rushmore with a fifth face, Donald Trump's. According to a social media post by Bettina Trump, the wife of Donald Trump Jr., the text of the cookie reads, quote, Black Hills, South Dakota, 5 presidents. Instead of delivering a unifying message about the country's future, President Trump devoted much of his remarks to warning against a renewed communist threat in the United States, calling for political opponents to be, quote, sent into exile, and pushing his Save America Act.
There is now a resurgence of the communist menace in our land, including from newcomers to our country who embrace ideas totally opposed to our way of life and our great success. We're not going to let them take too long or too much of our time as they play their games and send them into exile. We will send them quickly away. We can only lose the midterms if we allow ourselves to lose the midterms, if we are foolish, stupid, and unwise. But if we terminate the filibuster, as we should do, and immediately vote for the Save America Act, then we will not lose an election for 100 years.
I was 9 years old when the country celebrated the bicentennial, and the mood was completely different. Anne Applebaum writes about this in her piece in The Atlantic, but it was a national celebration. It was about America. It was not about one particular person. And my friend Karen Finney reminded me, she brought to dinner the other night, her father in 1976 bought a bunch of $2 bills. Commemorative, this is one of them. It's from 1976. On the front, it says 1970. But here's the key thing: it's the founders signing the Declaration of Independence. And what's significant about this is that the president's signature is not on this bill. The president himself, Gerald Ford at the time, is not on this bill. And it stands in stark contrast to the president we have now, who his signature is going to be on some of the money, who's trying to insert himself into the American story and make the American story about him and not about us.
It's not surprising that Donald Trump would do that. Like, we all knew this is how it would be. But I think actually seeing all of the ways in which he has inserted and superimposed himself onto this story of America is, like, historians are going to have a field day because there's so much there. And I think there was a world in which even Donald Trump as president took this as an anniversary of 250th, was able to prove his naysayers wrong, stick it to us who always say he thinks only about himself. And he just doesn't have that capability. Even in the speech yesterday in South Dakota, among all those guys, right, who gave so much to the country, flawed as though they were, he has an inability to not turn everything into a rally speech, a speech that is divisive, a thing about fighting, and bringing the country together. It's just not in him, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I do think 250 years into the American experiment, we're certainly at a very interesting moment that provides us a lot of fodder to scrutinize and question whether or not we are living up to those ideals right now. There's obviously been a very imperfect implementation of democracy, but I do encourage people to, at the end of the day, no matter what is going on in our world, to try to use the moment to take a step back and reflect on their own lives. Make it about themselves. Take that main character energy and channel it into yourself. I mean, yesterday I was talking with my dad, and my family history has actually informed my love of this country, and that's something I feel like I've sort of forgotten about, being caught up in the day-to-day news leading up to this. My great-grandfather was the mayor of a small town in Spain, and he opposed fascism and spent 2 years in a Franco concentration camp during the Spanish Civil War. My grandparents, living in that oppressive fascist government, decided to leave when they were old enough to do so. They moved to the United States in the 1950s and made a life out of nothing. So I hope everyone can...
None of our stories are possible anywhere else.
Correct.
Like all three of us and many of you at home, nothing that we could have done to be here happens anywhere but the United States.
Right.
And so I am grateful for that. But because I'm grateful for that, I am also, I feel a duty as a person who lives in this country who's benefited to make sure that other people also get those same benefits that the country has promised.
Yeah, I mean, as descendants of slaves who built this country and from a community that marched in the streets and bled and fought for the right to vote and to make this country a more perfect union. I defy anyone to tell me that I do not love this country and I am not a part of this country. I will fight anybody who tries to say that I am not American. Joining us now, Douglas Brinkley, presidential historian, professor of history at Rice University, and Anne Applebaum, staff writer for The Atlantic and author of Autocracy, Inc. This is a wonderful panel to kick off this show. Thank you both very much for coming to the weekend. And let me start with you, because as I noted in our host chat, I was 9 years old in 1976. And what I loved, among many things, about your piece in The Atlantic is that you pointed out you were 11 years old in 76, and you talked about what the country was like then, the celebrations happening all over the country, and you write in your piece. I had it in front of me. Here it is. Trump's anti-patriotic trap. Because they, meaning Trump and Vance, believe that only their clan represents America, that only people like them deserve to be considered real Americans, and that the American government exists to serve them alone, they need to undermine anything that tells a more unifying story. Talk more about that.
I was very struck in 2024 at the Republican convention by J.D. Vance's acceptance speech, which, if you remember, closed with a description of a graveyard in Kentucky, where he said generations of his family had been buried. And he spoke about this graveyard, and what he said was that it's for the people there, for the place. That's what makes me American. That's what I would fight for. And he very specifically said, not for some abstractions, not for some ideas. What he was saying was, you're American if you belong to a particular clan. The ideas of America, the idea of freedom and equality, the things that made us into a union when we were really disparate sets of states, people of many religions, all of those are abstractions. Those are ideas and principles. They aren't real. And what I wanted to argue in my piece, first of all, I also have a family graveyard. It's in Galveston, Texas. It also goes back many generations. There might even be people there who got to the Gulf Coast before J.D. Vance's family got to Appalachia. But even though it exists, it's not what makes me American. What makes me American and what makes my great-great-great-grandparents Americans and J.D. Vance's in-laws American, they were born in India, is the fact that all of us agree to live in this country according to a set of principles and ideas, these abstractions that he spoke about, and that we respect those rules and we then hand them to the next generation. And what's so disturbing about this administration is it's really the first to break precedent in that sense with the American idea. You know, what Trump was saying in his speech last night was, we can't lose the midterm, and therefore we have to find a way to steal it. You know, what he was saying was, you know, my enemies aren't people I disagree with. They're communists. They're people who have to be exiled. They're people who don't count. And he didn't say exactly who they were, just the enemies, just the people who don't agree with me. And this is fundamentally incompatible with the ideas of the United States that we've known and have grown up with. And I hope that Americans find it in their hearts today to think about what he's saying, to think about what it means, and resolve to dedicate themselves to building something different and something more recognizable, a country that you remember from the bicentennial and that I remember as well.
Douglas Brinkley, I want to play something from Zohran Mamdani because we keep looking for leaders in this country who will reflect back in these big moments of patriotism. And it's very interesting that despite everything that the Republicans thought they were going to get and that Fox News has said they've gotten from Mamdani after this speech, that it was very patriotic. And I want you to listen to this and we can talk about it on the other side.
Yeah.
We are told that America is exceptional because we are richer, stronger, more powerful than everyone else. The truth, my friends, is that America is exceptional because here, nothing is fixed into place. The frontier may be closed, we may have walked on the moon, but the work of fulfilling the values first enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, that work endures, and it belongs to us all. It belongs to our newest Americans, those standing here with me today, all of whom were recently naturalized. Nearly a decade ago, I too felt what you feel, the joy of no longer being just a New Yorker, but an American too.
All of those people surrounding him were recently naturalized U.S. citizens. I was struck by nothing is fixed into place. And the whole thing about this country is that we're always pushing forward, that we're always realizing that we can change, that the power is within us. I think about the fact that we have amendments to the Constitution. Even the guys who put it together knew that it was something that needed to be tweaked and changed, that they didn't get it all the way right that first time. A more perfect union, saying that we're going to keep moving toward that. As you sit here 250 years in, listen to what Mamdani said and what Trump said, what rings true to you?
Well, they were two very different speeches. Both were playing with the idea of American exceptionalism. Donald Trump at Mount Rushmore was talking about we're exceptional, and now we've got to drive the communists out of the country, basically restoking a Red Scare, something, the kind of speech Joe McCarthy would have easily given. Mamdani is reflecting back on Ellis Island and the tradition in New York of becoming a naturalized citizen. He's born in Uganda. When asked, he says, I can't have presidential ambitions. The Constitution says I can't because I was born in Uganda. And here it is, July 4th. Alexander Hamilton, one of the greats of the Revolutionary War era, had the same issue. He served his country in every way possible to George Washington. And as we know, his role in the Constitution and the Federalist Papers and the like, but he could never run for president. But they're a naturalized citizen, Mamdani was talking about. And it reminds us that we keep refreshing ourselves in this country, having new waves of immigrants. And that is the American dream. And that is what makes America exceptional. I think Mamdani hit on a lot of good, clear points, and clearly it was a speech John F. Kennedy would have been happy to give, Lyndon Johnson, many Democrats.